So she first has a passive. Her attacks and abilities apply stacks of Overwhelm each time they damage something, storing 77 plus 3 damage per stack of magic damage. Both of those have an AP ratio. So basically, the more you attack someone and the more you cast spells on someone, they'll get this stack of this debuff Overwhelm. And then when it's applied, if the stored damage exceeds their remaining health, they die. So basically, if you're like, I want to kill this guy, and we can go. I can show you the crab. If you're like, I want to kill this crab, you can like use your spells on it, and you'll notice there's a little a line on its health bar that's representing like the stacks of Overwhelm on it. And so using your spells and your attacks, just keep stacking that up. And then if you attack or cast a spell on a guy such that the Overwhelm stacked on them would kill them, it kills them. They explode. And they die. The ratios on it is it's 25% base plus 0.75% AP for any like additional stack on it. Additionally, this comes with a Sheen passive. Whenever you cast an ability, voila, your next attack applies 3 stacks of Overwhelm, it looks like, and does bonus damage. And you can stack that up to 3 times. So you'll notice there's 6, there's 9. So you have 3 stacks of this, and then attack and just like unload a bunch of damage on someone with your basic attack. And so yeah, basically you got Overwhelm, stack stuff on opponents, and then when they get low enough, they explode if you've got the stacks on them. And whenever you cast spells, your attacks are empowered. And so don't forget to be weaving autos in to your pattern when you're playing Mel, because those autos matter a lot for keeping your stacks of Overwhelm on people and, you know, dealing bonus damage. Is she designed to be a viable support? My understanding is that she could probably play support, although I believe she is intended to be a mid laner at the moment. But, you know, like many mages we make, a lot of mages that we make end up being viable supports or viable bot lane AP carries. Hui is a recent example. Hui is a primary mid laner, but he's also a fairly decent support and AP carry. Mel could very easily be a support or AP carry, I would guess. I don't know if she's viable there, though. I'm not sure, but she's intended to be a mid. Is this budget Smolder? Sorry, when I say stacks, these aren't permanent stacks. These are just stacks you put on enemies when you attack them and do things to them. So this isn't like some like permanent stack that gets you AP or anything like that. This is just your spells put these stacks on people and eventually explode them like that. Okay, her Q. Her Q is Radiant Volley. She unleashes a barrage of 10 projectiles that explode in an area around a target location. Each explosion deals 26 magic damage, up to 258 total. Deals 25% reduced damage when used against minions. So this spell, you'll notice it like kind of has 2 circles on it. The reason it has that is the exploding projectiles are not all center pointed. They're like slightly around the center, meaning that like if you hit someone on the edge, you'll notice it only got like 3 stacks. Only a few of those hit them. And so you actually though, but if you hit them with the center of it, it's gonna get all of them. And so basically it's kind of a spell that in a way has a sweet spot in that when you're further from the edge, less the projectiles hit because they like kind of like circle around. But if you're like kind of in the center circle of it, then you'll get all 10, like so. But if they're on the edge, it's not gonna be all 10. So as long as they're in the center circle that you see in the indicator, they're gonna all 10. Additionally, as you can see, this is a fairly long range spell. I'm curious what the range on this is. Let's go take a look at LOL Wiki. The range is definitely long, but how long? Let's find out. Does LOL Wiki have Mel on it yet? Maybe they say. Looks like they don't have Mel on it yet. So I couldn't tell you how long it is right now. It looks to be about like, I don't know, is that like 1100 or so? 1200? 1300? Pretty good range, especially when you consider that it also can hit people outside of the center, right? So if you're over here, right, you can also just edge people with it. Of course, that's not going to do as much damage. So yeah, that's Radiant Volley. Basically, it's a damage spell, farming spell, bread and butter. It has an 85% AP ratio if you hit the whole thing, with 250 base damage. It has, why do I have 18 cooldown reduction? It's 15%. So it has like a, looks like it's around a 5.5 second cooldown or something. So somewhat repeatable. Yeah, so that's that spell. Then we got Solar Snare. Mel fires a radiating orb, rooting enemies at its center for 1.88 seconds. Oh, it's because I have this level 2. It's an interesting number. 1.88 seconds, so it's a 1.75 to 2.25 second root. And so that's actually a note here is that like its root duration starts pretty good. 1.75 seconds for a CC duration at the start is generally pretty decent. So it gets to a pretty good value of 2.25, but it starts pretty well as well. Like obviously a lot of roots, there's definitely like roots in the game that like start at like 2 plus, but 1.75 is a decent duration for a starting root. The orb builds up a hostile area around it that slows enemies by 30%. So basically you have this orb that you send further forward. The inner part of the orb roots people. It looks like it passes through. Let's take a look. Does it pass through? Looks like it does pass through, so let's see if that means we can hit multiple guys with it. Yep, you can get multiple roots with it. And then if it misses, it will still slow. If it misses the root, it can still slow people. And so people on the edge of it, hit by the edge of it, get slowed by some amount. Although it looks like that slow area gets bigger as it travels. So if you use it in melee range, it's probably a bit harder to hit in terms of getting a slow. Yeah, so root and slow has a... looks like it's like a 10.5 base cooldown that scales down. So the cooldown is actually like pretty good. Any cooldown in a spell like this that's around like, 9 to 11 is a pretty good like starting cooldown. And it's got about the same range as your Q, it looks like. Yeah, this in the Q. One thing to note about this root that it looks like, again, I'm just saying what it looks like. I'm not sure. I don't know the exact numbers. It looks like it's slow moving. So if I was to compare this to a Lux binding or a Morgana binding, this feels like it travels slower than those spells. I don't know if that's true though. I'd have to go find the info on the travel time. But it looks like it travels slower than a lot of the standard binding spells, at least by a little bit. Is it faster? Slower? Not sure. So anyways, yeah, that's a root. I'm curious to compare it to like Lux and Morg, see how fast it is comparing. And then we have Rebuttal. Mel forms a barrier around herself that reflects projectiles from enemy champions, prevents her from taking damage, and gives her 30% decaying move speed for 1 second. So this is a reflection, a move speed steroid, and an invulnerability. So I wonder if we're supposed to treat her health bar. If it's preventing her from taking damage. Does it work on towers? I'm guessing it doesn't. Most things don't work on towers, but let's find out. I think I got my timing wrong. Give me a second. I'm gonna do this right. Okay, yeah. It does not work on towers. You cannot reflect tower shots. You cannot prevent tower damage. Is there a projectile haver around? Is it not working on the dragon? It's definitely preventing the damage from the dragon. It doesn't seem to reflecting the dragon's projectile. Oh, it's only projectiles from champions. It says champions, so it doesn't look like it works on minions, monsters, stuff like that. Yeah. They said if Yasuo's wind wall can block it, she reflects it. I'm curious how that's going to work against Jin W, since Jin W is technically not a projectile, but that seems like a good rule. Although I think Yasuo's wind wall does work on dragon, so I'm guessing it's like if it works on a champion, it'll work on a champion here. So this spell, of course, is going to be good for keeping you alive. The reflected projectile does 40% of its original damage as magic damage, so you can't just like say reflective Veigar ult and get the exact value from it. It depends somewhat on Mel's level of the spell and her personal performance since it has AP ratio. It doesn't apply item effects. It's calculated with the original caster's attributes. So it basically is like, hey, what is this Veigar ult going to do from Veigar? Okay, do 40% of that, as an example. And so you might think, oh, you should only use the spell defensively, right? Like, is Mel just sit on the spell and use it to, like, never die? Obviously, that's going to be a strong output of it. But you have to remember that move speed is going to be somewhat decent on this character in order to, like, you know, get in range to use some of these spells. And you also want to remember that casting W gives you stacks of your passive. And proccing that passive is going to be important in certain situations. And so, well, she's very likely going to, you know, be using it defensively quite a bit. There's also going to be some cases where if you want to kill that guy, you're probably going to want to consider casting your W in order to, like, get in there and apply some more passive stacks and kill them with it. You came from the YouTube shorts? Hello, welcome. You must have been watching He Who Quacks. Yeah. Finally, we have Golden Eclipse. Passive. Overwhelm damage is increased to 78 damage plus 3 damage per stack. So this thing levels up Overwhelm, for starters. So whenever you rank your ultimate, Overwhelm's damage increases. So instead of scaling with character level, Mel's Overwhelm passive scales with her ult. And then the active is, Mel unleashes her power on all enemies affected by Overwhelm, dealing magic damage plus 4% magic damage per Overwhelm stack. So basically, it seems what's going on here then is, the pattern is, you stack up your Overwhelm on enemies, and then with your ultimate, you can actually, like, kind of like in some ways, like, double the Overwhelm. Double is the wrong word because it has its own scaling. But basically, the ultimate is going to basically say, hey, if that guy has a lot of Overwhelm stacks on him, if I ult him, it's going to detonate those stacks for even more damage and, you know, ideally cause them to die. So it would be something like, you stack it up. Oh, well, we'll do it to this guy then. I'm casting it multiple times because I have no cooldowns, by the way. Right, so basically, if you're playing her, one of the things you're going to be wanting to do is kind of like look at the enemy and see how close they are to being executed. And if they're pretty close, like if they're within a certain threshold to be executed, you can basically ult and be like, okay, I want you to die. And then the ult will kill them. And so that's how the play pattern goes, is as Mel, you're going to be using your range and your spells to, you know, CC and damage and apply stacks to people. And then eventually you're going to, like, when you've got your stacks on enough people or the right person, you execute them in the ultimate, it looks like. For cooldowns, unfortunately I have 18 ability haste. I don't know where it came from. Probably one of my runes. Yeah, it's Transcendence, I guess. Let's actually, like, exit out really quick and get rid of that haste so I can just see what the cooldowns are. Mel's recommended runes are Arcane Comet with Precision, or First Strike with Sorcery, something like that. I like Arcane Comet, I'm a fan. Dark Harvest is also in there. Dark Harvest probably combos really well with your ultimate. I'm gonna get rid of Transcendence and the cooldown reduction just so we can see what her spells' cooldowns are more cleanly. Let's see what the cooldowns are. The cooldown on the Q is 10 to 6, so it starts fairly high. 10 is like a pretty high cooldown for a bread and butter spell in lane on a mage, I'd say, but it gets down to 6, which is pretty decent. The W is a 35-second cooldown, scaling down to 23. That is massive, by the way. Like, that is a massive, massive, massive cooldown at rank 1. And even 23 is high. Like, 23 is not by any means low. Like, when you max this spell, it's still going to have a high cooldown. This is a very, very, very high cooldown. Like, what's that compared to Yasuo's Wind Wall? Yasuo being another character is very high. Like, comparatively, Yasuo's Wind Wall, really high cooldown in lane, 25 seconds. What about, like, Samira? 25 seconds at rank 1. Samira's Blade Whirl, 30 seconds at rank 1. And by the way, 30 seconds is a massive cooldown. So just noting that this W is a very, very, very high cooldown. Quite potent cooldown. 35-second cooldown is fake when she loads in with 10% CDR. Yeah, but so does so many other characters, right? Like, you can't say, like, this character has lower cooldowns than everybody else because they load in with CDR when everybody can load in with CDR, right? Like, when you say, like, a character has a 10-second cooldown, that's in comparison to everybody else. And, you know, everybody else is always also going to scale with some amount of CDR. So I would not agree with you that 35-second cooldown, like, doesn't count since Mel can buy CDR because, you know, other characters can get CDR as well. Now, that said, when you compare it to Yasuo, to be fair, Yasuo's not going to have as much CDR, neither is Samira. So Mel can probably get her cooldown as the game progresses closer to, like, a character like Yasuo or Samira. But, you know, like, when a mage has a 10-second cooldown, that accounts for the fact that mages also can buy CDR. So, yeah, basically, really, really high cooldown on her W. Her E has a 12 to 10-second cooldown, so that's, like, you know, that's a fairly decent, good cooldown for a spell like this. I actually thought it was a bit lower when I was reading the CDR. 12 is actually, like, I'm not going to say it's high, but it's also not low for a spell like this. Like, 12 is kind of like medium. Like, to give you a comparison here, like, when Lux's Q is a 13-second cooldown, it often feels like if she uses it, it's not going to be up very much. But when it's like, it's not going to be up to be able to fight later. But then when Lux's Q is like a 10-second cooldown, it feels like she can use it like a lot more aggressively a lot of times. And so the difference between like a 10 and a 13-second cooldown for like a spell like this E is a big deal. And hers is like right in the middle at 12. So like that's like an okay cooldown. And once you rank it, it gets down to 10, which is like pretty good. Yeah. And then her ultimate has a 100 to 80-second cooldown. So those are the cooldowns. Yeah, so that's Mel. Um, 1.75-second root at level 1 is kind of OP. Well, while it is a good route, I would not agree with you that that's OP. There is a number of characters in similar classes to her that have, like, routes of similar duration. Like, Morgana's route is 2 seconds. Lux's route is 2 seconds. Nico's route, I believe, is 2 seconds. Hui's route is 1.2, so she does a longer route than Hui's. So I would agree with you that it's good, by the way. I think 1.75 seconds at level 1 is definitely like a pretty good route duration. But routes tend to be able to have a bit higher duration on characters like Mel.